welcome to you all at home.
You've still got a chance to win this race, haven't you?
Just drive. I wanna be the only one to feel
Man, I didn't think I'd be doing this again. Hi guys, Harrison, I'm back at it once again for a brand new video for you, and welcome back to Dre TV. And there's something I've not done in a long time, and I'm surprised I'm doing this, but let's just say, given that the season started to die down from a competitive standpoint, we're getting more and more little stories that are trickling through that are actually worth talking about now, and given my podcast is on hiatus at the moment because of technical problems, I think now is a good time to start talking about this. And I didn't really want to make this video until I watched, it was Sky F1's midweek report that's hosted by Natalie Pinkham, and it had Ted Kravitz and David Brabham on there this time around. And it was a discussion they had following Japan, and obviously the big talking point was Hamilton passing Rosberg into turn one. That eventually, it was an aggressive but legal move from Hamilton that put Rosberg on the grass a little bit, but he made the move stick and took the race lead and would go on to win by 17-18 seconds. Now, during the midweek report, Pinkham and Brabham basically had a discussion about it, and they accused Nico Rosberg of lacking the killer instinct and the mental game to be able to be a world champion. They said that Rosberg didn't have a world champion mindset. I'd already had a line of thinking as to what was going on with Rosberg and what the media are trying to do with Rosberg, and this was the one that I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back to me, and it's a frustrating one for me because it feels like Rosberg's being needlessly attacked, especially given that the day after the race, Mercedes admitted that Rosberg had a lack of power off the start line. So it basically made Rosberg a sitting duck coming off the grid for Hamilton to pass. But they're talking about how he lacks the mental aptitude to be a Formula 1 driver. And it's... not to be an F1 driver, but to be a world champion. And I thought, that's just bullshit. Like, I sat here and I said on Twitter, has anybody just considered the fact that Rosberg might not be as good as Hamilton? Like, I don't need to go into Rosberg's mental game as validation for this. And it just made me sit up, open my eyes and realise just how big a scapegoat they're making Nico Rosberg out to be. Now, you don't need me to tell you that Sky are biased towards Hamilton. We all know that Sky have an agenda towards the Brits, and particularly Hamilton, because Button is not relevant right now in that McLaren. Well, he was last week because of the contract talks, but that was like the first weekend where they weren't completely up Hamilton's rear end. And in the eyes of Sky, the lowest common denominator is Hamilton fans. And anyone that wants to deny it is being delusional, quite frankly. And Rosberg has always kind of been the whipping boy. Mostly, I think, to make Hamilton better. We all know, like I said, we all know that Sky have an agenda for Hamilton. We all know they want them to make Hamilton look as good as possible. So, in Sky's eyes, the easy way of doing that, instead of praising Hamilton every 2 minutes, is to basically whack Rosberg over the stick for not being as good. And I think that's bullshit. And I think it's hypocritical of many fans to do the same thing. Now, here's an example for you. And you know what? This is funny because I did some research towards this. Rosberg really isn't that bad against Hamilton. They've been together for 2.5 seasons now. Head to head, Rosberg's record against Hamilton is 20-32. Now, people will say, oh, well, what about retirements? My response is, the World Championship table doesn't have mercy on retirements, and neither shall I. It's a 20-32 record. That means it's split 40-60 in Hamilton's favour. Rosberg in 2013 finished 18 points behind Hamilton, and Rosberg had 2 more mechanical retirements than Hamilton did. I'd call that year a wash, basically, inconclusive. 2014, we all know Hamilton went on to win the title, but it was a title that everybody was looking forward to the final round because we were getting a, and I quote, title fight, even though the gap was more than 14 points, and we all knew that because of Mercedes' dominance, Hamilton could coast home in second, and it really not be a factor. And even so, Rosberg lost 50 points to Hamilton in the final round, so the table looks worse than what it actually was in the end. So, I don't know how much more you're asking for Rosberg here, especially given he beat Hamilton in his own best game, which was his qualifying speed. He won the pole trophy that year. Hamilton made numerous mistakes in qualifying. Sure, Hamilton would come through in the race, but Rosberg wasn't blown out that season. This is the first year where it's looking like a blowout. And even then, it's a little bit harsh because Rosberg's had that Monza retirement, but then again, Hamilton had the Singapore one, which Rosberg didn't cash in because Mercedes was shit on the day. Point is that Rosberg has actually held his own quite well against a guy who has 41 career wins, is probably going to win his third world title in a month's time. And in the grand scheme of things, given how strong Hamilton's fan base is on social media and how strong a following Hamilton has in today's F1 in this social media-centric age, many people genuinely think Hamilton is the best driver of all time or is up there with one of the greatest drivers of all time. And as a result, they're calling Rosberg average. So let me get this straight. A guy is average compared to a 41-time race winner and probable triple world champion-elect. That makes Rosberg average to you when he has 11 career wins. Like, I can't remember the last time a guy with double-digit wins in F1 was criticised so much outside of Jacques Villeneuve. And we all knew that Villeneuve had a ridiculously good car back then too. It's amazing now how the level that we're using Rosberg as a scapegoat. And there's one obvious comparison that I can draw to this, and it was Mark Webber. Mark Webber was a guy that went 0-5 against Sebastian Vettel in the 5 seasons they were together at Red Bull. Webber had 9 career wins at Red Bull. Sebastian Vettel had 38. And only one of the 5 years in question was Webber really even in the same league as Sebastian. 2010 was that year. 2011, 12, 13, and 13 were all blowouts, and he beat Webber in 2009 too in his first year in the team. People forget, Vettel was runner-up that year to Jenson Button, and only finished, I think, 11 points behind him in the championship. I know it was the old scoring system, but Vettel brought it back towards the end of that year, when Brawn wasn't quite so broken. But we all applauded Mark Webber for showing grit and determination and for being honest. It's amazing how little I think Webber was criticised in comparison to what Rosberg is now. Even though on paper, Webber was a lot weaker than Seb. Maybe they had mercy on Webber because of his age. Maybe they had mercy on Webber because he was arguably more likeable, even though he was more of a moaner than anything else. He had the Casey Stoner vibe of being a bit of a complainer. Didn't like it when things went his way. And I know people are going to have conspiracy theories about Mark Webber, saying, oh, the team was biased towards Vettel. People, if the team was biased towards Vettel, Multi-21 would never be a code that existed in Red Bull's terminology. They would not have a policy to let the second driver win if the team was that biased towards Seb. Period. If the team was that biased, Multi-21 would never have existed. Period. End the discussion. But it's amazing how people liked Webber for being, inverted commas, gritty, and often got away with being criticised, even though in his last season he didn't even win a race when Vettel won 13. He was completely destroyed by Vettel. Vettel was in one of the most dominant cars F1's seen in a long time for a year. But that's besides the point. Even Massa got buried for it when we all knew that team was Alonso's team. They were building cars for Alonso. It was a one-car team. Massa never had it his way. Massa was designed to lose, and even then Massa was a team player and was willing to help Alonso win the title, just to save face. Same as Rubens Barrichello. And Barrichello was a beast before he went to Ferrari. He was very, very fast indeed. But, the difference is that Rubens was arguably the most unselfish driver in the history of F1. Man did everything to help Michael win. Everything. So, criticising Rosberg for his mental game and, looking for reasons to criticise Rosberg for not being as good as Hamilton, who by the time it's all said and done will probably be one of the greatest drivers of all time, isn't really a fair criticism in my opinion. It's a bit like I said it on video before, it's a bit like criticising Belgium for not being as good as Brazil's 1970 World Cup team. It's not really a valid comparison. It's like, that's the greatest World Cup team of all time. How dare you not play like them? what? It doesn't make any sense. And we're talking about two of the greatest drivers ever here. And unfortunately, what people fail to realise is that in the grand scheme of things, we need drivers like Webber, like Massa, like Rubens Barrichello, like Nico Rosberg, because it puts into true context just how freaking good the really great drivers are, like Sebastian, like Lewis, like Fernando Alonso. It's really frustrating to me that Rosberg is so often made into a whipping boy and a scapegoat to enhance the Hamilton agenda. And I'm not saying Rosberg is this amazing, underrated driver. Rosberg is a world-class driver, and I'm being real with you here. Mercedes never needed Lewis Hamilton. They didn't. The car was so good, Rosberg could lead that team to a title, and we all be giving Rosberg the credit we're giving Hamilton now. Period. When a car is that good, you can have average drivers in it. Period. Because even Rosberg last year, even with a double-point retirement at the end, still scored more than 300 points. More than enough to win a championship. And like I said, even on a bad day, Rosberg's probably finishing second most of the time. That's the context of the car. They didn't need a guy like Hamilton, but they got him because it made good marketing sense. And it's worked out beautifully for them. They now have two world-class drivers in an unstoppable team. They didn't need Hamilton. But hey, now they've got Hamilton, let's use Rosberg as a stick to beat people with. I think history will be kind to Rosberg by the time it's all said and done. I think people will look at him as a guy that was always a little bit unlucky because they hired Hamilton when Rosberg was clearly good enough to win a title. Period. He's going to be a two-time runner-up probably by the time this season's over. Webber was never even a runner-up in a championship. Think about that for a minute. But it's a situation where I feel like Rosberg is being used to make an example of in a negative light, and I think it's unfair. And I think it's not entirely the fans' fault. A lot of people drink the Sky and media Kool-Aid. And, you know, a lot of people want to make Hamilton look as good as possible. And, again, the easy way of doing that is criticising Rosberg, criticising his mental game, criticising his family approach, criticising his priorities, saying he's not as fast, saying he's not doing this, he's not doing that. It doesn't really wash with me because I think it's an unfair comparison to make. And no, Nico Rosberg is not average. Nico Rosberg is a world-class driver. World-class drivers win races. Like, you're not average if you've won 11 career races. You're 26th on the all-time wins list for F1. And Rosberg will win more before the end of his career. He'll probably have 15 to 20 wins. You know, Jenson Button, I think, has 15. Just a thought. And he won a title. Look, for me, on the whole, Rosberg is a great driver, just an unfortunate victim of circumstance, and I think he's been made to be an enormous scapegoat, in my opinion. And for me, rather than bash Rosberg, let's appreciate what he's trying to do here, and trying to make a championship against one of the fastest drivers this sport has ever seen. Just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think we're all being overly harsh towards Rosberg? Do you really think he's just that average? Or do you think there's more to it than that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic as ever. If you want to see more Dre TVs, please leave a like on the video and support it. I've been Harrison101. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.